Mr. N. Ram is a doyen in print media in India. Chairman of the Hindu Group Publishing Private Limited, he has had an illustrious career that has spanned over 55 years. He's of course best known for leading investigations on the Bofors arms deal and more recently the Rafale deal. His iconic statement, "No force on earth can make me reveal the source," will remain an exceptional display of character and courage in times when most of the press chooses to crawl before the ruling forces.
What is this rising tide in Indian politics? We have to think about it. The 2019 election delivered for many of us who believe in democracy, secularism, and pluralism, the idea of India, if you like, a nasty surprise for whatever reason. I'm not going into that. And as was mentioned earlier, it was a very powerful majority that the BJP, under the leadership of Mr. Narendra Modi, won. What has changed so unexpectedly? I have long believed that in politics, you must expect the unexpected. When people get dejected, it could cut both ways, of course. If you're complacent, then you could get a nasty surprise. But you should expect the unexpected, because politics is not a simple business. Many things go into it. Whether political science is truly a science in the sense the natural sciences are is another question I won't go into. But it's almost impossible to predict what is in store. And the present upsurge, whether you can call it rising tide or mass revolt, largely spontaneous, at least in the first stages, now increasingly organized. What it is needs to be analyzed. We have to get, my opening text is an article in the Hindu, a very interesting and, shall I say, inspiring article by Ananya Vajpayee, published yesterday, titled "Symbols and Slogans of Substance." Of substance is the key word here, because you could have symbols and slogans of no great import. But she argues, and to a large extent I think in that limited space substantiates her argument. And to quote from that, India is bubbling over with Gandhian forms of resistance to the Narendra Modi, Amit Shah regime's majoritarianism. That's the key formulation in this. And I don't want to get into the details, but she cites many examples, starting in mid-December 2014, the savage attack on the campus of the Jamia Millia Islamia University, followed by the attack on Aligarh Muslim University and elsewhere. And then the surprise, unexpectedly strong resistance, revolt, whatever you call it, civil disobedience, the labels don't matter, but these have been largely non-violent. And I think coming in proximity with the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth, and coming very close to the day he was assassinated in 1948 by the same forces which are celebrating the undermining of India's democracy, secularism, free speech, liberties, and so on, much the same forces. There may be debates about whether some X was involved in the conspiracy to assassinate Mahatma Gandhi. No finality about that, but we do know what the forces were, what the ideology was that brought about behind his assassination. And to everyone's surprise, led by students and youth in most places, with Muslim women coming out very strongly and assertively. Ananya Vajpayee says that the emergence of Muslim women, twice disenfranchised, first by being a part of a minority religious community, and also by virtue of gender, facing a double discrimination. They have come out in a magnificent way in Shaheen Bagh in Delhi, but there have been other iconic sites, as Ananya Vajpayee points out, Park Park Circus in Kolkata, the so-called gateway of India in Mumbai, the town hall in Bangalore, and Valluvar Kotam in Chennai. I must add, she doesn't mention it, but I add that to the list. And this, I think, is unprecedented in sweep and surprisingly sustained over a very long period, over a period of weeks. And I think it is important to my writer friend Sudhindra Kulkarni, ex-BJP, who worked in Prime Minister Vajpayee's PMO, told me the other day that to the best of his knowledge, this is bigger than the student mobilization during the JP movement, what's happened now. So what's behind this, whatever you call it, this upsurge, this mass revolt, this civil disobedience movement, inspired, again surprisingly, by Mahatma Gandhi's example, his life and so on, his methods of struggle, whatever you might think of some of those methods, they stand out because Mahatma Gandhi is widely recognized as the greatest Indian of modern times. And surprisingly, a lot of people, you read many reports, books that say that Gandhiji's teachings are forgotten. His life is forgotten. It just belongs to the distant past. And that's a surprise that it has come to the fore in many areas. Of course, it's not just Gandhian streams in politics that are active. The left is very active. The other parties, including the regional parties, are active. Many state legislatures have passed resolutions saying that we shall not enforce this CAA, NRC, NPR in the way they want anyway. The details are not important now. They have to figure it out. And even allies have broken away from the BJP on this. And although on a different issue, one of the biggest setbacks was the oldest ally for the BJP. The true ally, the Shiv Sena, has now bolted and is now in power in Maharashtra in a very unlikely alliance. You see the results of state assembly elections in recent weeks, recent months. The India Today, in a recent cover story, points out that only 35% of India's territory is now directly ruled by this lot. Only 35%. I don't know what it is in terms of population. It's still a minority. But many state governments are ruled by non-BJP governments. Many states are ruled by non-BJP governments. A few of them allies, a few of them like AIDMK, secret allies, or fence-sitters in some cases, but even they have problems. What about Sri Lankan Tamil refugees? There are nearly 100,000 of them in Tamil Nadu, 65,000 in the refugee camps, and 35,000 or so outside, living on their own. What about them? And so on. I think there will be a separate discussion on the details of the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens and the National Population Register. What is the nexus? What really happened, right? There's going to be a separate discussion, or maybe Gopal is going to deal with that also, maybe. Because I don't want to take up too much my time. It's my scarce time going into those details. But I just want to highlight one point. There is a continuity of this communal argument. It's not that it appeared suddenly here. It goes back to the debates in the Constituent Assembly. For example, initially when the Constitution was being drafted, I read the sections, the debates dealing with the citizenship question in the Constituent Assembly. Initially, there was no great interest in citizenship when the Constituent Assembly began to draft the Constitution. But after partition, suddenly, the citizenship issue came to the fore for obvious reasons. But what is notable there is that there was some kind of communal divide. Though Hindus who came from Pakistan were labeled refugees in the debates. This doesn't occur in any legal text or in the Constitution. But Muslims who went to Pakistan and came back for whatever reason, either to reclaim their properties or because they thought better of their original decision. They could have been forced to flee in the horrors of partition, during the horrors of partition. When they came back, they are called migrants, and they were treated with suspicion by several members of the Constituent Assembly, but to the great credit of Jawaharlal Nehru, Alladi Krishnasamy Iyer, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and the overwhelming majority in the Constituent Assembly, that communal sentiment was just quashed, and there is no legal text that shows that you can discriminate. In your approach to citizenship, you can discriminate on the basis of religion, and that I think is a great victory earlier. But coming to more recent times, I don't agree that this is just a diversionary tactic. It may have that effect, diverting or deflecting attention from the economic crisis, the collapse of their dream of building a powerful economy in India, all the numbers that they mentioned. The budget is going to be unveiled very soon. But as a neoliberal economist, Arvind Subramaniam, former chief economic advisor, along with John Feldman, as they pointed out in a Harvard study, the economy is now approaching the critical care unit, to put it mildly. But it is not just, I think, to divert attention from this. We'll be making a serious mistake if we see this as a merely diversionary tactic, because this is a project that they've long had in mind. And this project of Hindutva, let me quote from the BJP's election manifesto in 2019 and contrast it with the BJP's election manifesto in 2014 on this issue. And I quote, "We are committed to the enactment of the Citizenship Amendment Bill for the protection of individuals of religious minority communities from neighboring countries escaping persecution. We'll make all efforts to clarify the issues to the sections of the population from the northeastern states who have expressed apprehensions regarding the legislation. We reiterate this is the key sentence, we reiterate our commitment to protect the linguistic, cultural and social identity of the people of the Northeast, Hindus, Jains, Buddhists and Sikhs. Note that Christians are not in this list. That's been added on later for whatever reason I'm not going into. Hindus, Jains, Buddhists and Sikhs escaping persecution from India's neighboring countries will be given citizenship in India. Burma or Myanmar is not mentioned. Sri Lanka is not mentioned, although the Tamils continue to have a problem. This is part of their agenda. And I don't want to read the section on Jammu and Kashmir. Article 370 is very much there. And Ram Temple, that issue is there. But another sentence occurs here. At the same time, we will expeditiously complete the national registration of citizens in Assam and actively consider its extension to other states. And Mr. Amit Shah, Home Minister, before and after he became Home Minister, has gone on record saying this is going to be a nationwide project. What is the objective behind it? To identify infiltrators or illegal migrants. Those are the terms that are being used, and the NRC is clearly going to be a major tool if it is allowed to go beyond Assam. Now what happened in Assam, the NRC experience in Assam? I don't want to go into the details, but it was a horror story, it was a nightmare. The kind of harassment there was, especially for poor people. All kinds of anecdotes, stories are there, individual stories of somebody who had fought for the country who finds himself not on the list. I heard one case was reported where one of the among twin brothers, one twin was included and the other one was not. And so on. It's a horrible story, and we know that about 1.9 million people were omitted, of whom approximately 1.2 are Hindus. This was the BJP's problem. What they considered their vote bank, Bengali-speaking Hindus who had come and the Assamese would have none of it. So what do you do with these people? Do you send them to detention camps? The government has been lying, saying that there's no detention. We never talked about detention camps. There are instructions sent to state governments that you must build detention camps, and even some model, guidelines have been laid down on how to build them and how to administer them and so on. Then we come to the first step, the National Population Register. Sometimes they say that this is really part of the census exercise, which it is not. And you will see, if you look at, I have the questionnaire here, if there's anybody interested, I can take you through that. What are the changes in the questions that are going to be asked? And one of them is on Ram Kumar's favorite project, Aadhaar, which is now included. So this is going to be a dangerous exercise, but the point here, beyond the details, is that this is part of the Hindutva project. This is what they want, Hindu Rashtra. This is Hindu Rashtra in part, the progress of Hindu Rashtra. It's not a merely diversionary tactic, although it may have that effect. And this, I think, has to be understood. But today, coming back to the upsurge, the mass upsurge in scale, in intensity, in ingenuity, in forms of expression, which Ananya Vajpayee celebrates in that article. There are other articles. It's a very fine piece by Mukul Kesavan on the attack on Jamia, and some very fine pieces of writing have emerged from this crisis. Ananya Vajpayee also calls attentions to the songs, the slogans, coming back with Iqbal's songs, Faiz's poetry, and many other forms. And I think this will continue. But we can't be complacent. We know that any spontaneous movement or largely spontaneous movement tends to lose steam unless it is organized. So you can't keep political parties away from it. At the same time, you can't label it under the leadership of some political party or the other. Then the movement gets split, and that's what the others want, the other side wants. So I think it's important to keep the spirit alive, constantly reflect on what we are doing, because it's more than just opposition. It's not as though everyone who's come out is very clear about the communal or anti-secular nature of what is afoot. There are many drivers behind the movement, and it is clear that one of the drivers is young people feel suffocated. Their liberties are being attacked. Campuses that have been built through public money have been assailed, savagely assaulted. Muslims have been savagely attacked, have been targeted especially, but it's not just a Hindu-Muslim issue. It goes beyond that. And otherwise you can't make sense of why students and youth, students in particular, are in the forefront of this movement. People who the other day were supposed to be part of the BJP's vote bank, according to a lot of analysis, suddenly you find them out on the streets and keeping this. I have to conclude. 2 minutes? 1 minute? Okay. And I think that is very important, but the task now is to have more discussion on this, to see what's behind this movement. Without that diagnosis, we won't be able to plan ahead what's there. What this rising tide, whether it's really a rising tide or just something that is a reaction to what is afoot, a massive resistance, all this has to be figured out. But at the end of the day, I am very optimistic about what is ahead. There is nothing to lose here for us. We have to go ahead without doubts, without inhibitions, while adhering to the completely peaceful nature of this mass upsurge. Peaceful in our own interest, because once something happens, some outburst of violence or whatever, then I think you'll get into trouble. First of all, they'll paint you in very bad colors. So I think it's extremely important to keep the discipline that the present movement has. And then also, I have no time here to reflect on the performance of institutions like the judiciary, but if there is an opportunity during the question session, I want to bring it. I think the judiciary has been very disappointing, the higher judiciary. For example, that judgment on shutting down the internet and other curtailment restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. The Supreme Court came out with a very eloquent statement of first principles, but they ended up with doing nothing except giving an advisory opinion. And Gautam Bhatia, in a very fine analysis, says that under the former Chief Justice, Mr. Gogoi, the Supreme Court transitioned from being a rights court to becoming an executive court, lining up, doing executive things and largely backing the executive. I hope this is going to change as well, but we can discuss the performance of institutions, the police, the bureaucracy, the judiciary at various levels, parliament, different legislatures, political parties, the media, and so on. But for that, there is no time, and I thank the chair for giving me this.